This is part 2 of lesson 3.1, graphing linear equations. And so in this part of our lesson, we're going to learn how to graph linear equations by making a table of values. Step number 1, if necessary, solve the equation for y. Isolate y on the left-hand side of the equation. So your equation is going to look like this. Y equals ax plus c. Okay? If you're given an equation in standard form, you're going to rewrite it to isolate y, to get y alone on the left-hand side. Okay? Number 2, select values from the domain x. Here are some pointers you need to follow. If the coefficient of x is an integer, in other words, it's not a fraction, we will always select the following 4 values, -1, 0, 1, and 2. However, if the coefficient of x is a fraction, then you're going to select numbers that are multiples of the denominator to make it easy to graph. So if your coefficient, for example, is 1/4, the values you're going to select to write your table of values are -4, 0, 4, and 8. The multiples of 4. Another example, if the coefficient of x is 1/2, then select the following members of the domain, -2, 0, 2, and 4. The multiples of 2. I'll do one more example. If your coefficient is 1/3, we would do -3, 0, 3, and 6. And when we do some examples, you'll see why this is going to be very fruitful and very, you're going to want to do that because it's going to make your life way easier. Okay, so again, just to review, number 1, isolate y if necessary. Number 2, select values from the domain. Number 3, determine the value of y for each x value that you have selected by replacing the values for x in the equation. And number 4, create your ordered pairs and graph. Okay, take a moment, pause your video, jot it all down, have your steps in your notes, please. And we're going to practice making tables of values. Okay. Oh, before we do that, here are 2 types of equations that you will learn how to graph very easily. You need to know this. Equations of horizontal lines can be written y equals c, or y equals a constant. When you have an equation in that form, y equals a constant, you know it's a horizontal line. There's no need to make a table of values. There's no need to find an x and y intercept. There's no need to do anything but graph the line. And it's really, really, really this simple. Let me give you an example. If I have an equation that reads y equals +3, here's my graph of that equation. All you have to do is graph it, and it's that easy. It really, really is. So make sure that you label your x and your y axis. Locate +3 on the y axis. And then you're just going to draw a horizontal line through that point. That is the equation of, the graph of y equals 3 of that equation. All right, so the other one that I want you to know how to do by heart are vertical lines. Equations of vertical lines are in this form. X equals a constant. X equals c. Again, for this type of equation, there is no making a table. You don't need to find x and y intercepts. You will simply graph them. I'll give you an example. If I have x equals -2, and that's the equation I want you to graph, you're simply going to do this. This is your x-axis, this is your y-axis. Locate that point on the x-axis. There it is, -2. And it is a vertical line that runs through -2. And there it is. So those are the really, really easy ones to graph. You should have no problem graphing those. Okay, now let's practice making a table of values. Number 1, y equals 1/3 x plus 2. So step number 1 was isolate y if necessary. Well, notice with me that it's not necessary because y is already isolated in this case. Okay, so we don't need to do step 1. Step number 2, we have to find x values. So here's what the table looks like. Your x values, 1/3 x plus 2 goes there. Your y values, and then your ordered pair goes there. All right, notice with me that the coefficient for x is a fraction. And if you remember step number 2, if it's a fraction, the best thing to do is find the multiples of the denominator and use those for your x value. So, since my denominator is 3, here we go. -3, 0, 3. Sorry, having a rough time here with the stylus. Here we go. 3 and 6. Okay. Now the next thing that we'll do is we'll substitute those values for x. All right, so let's do that. 1/3 times -3/1 plus 2. What is 1/3 times -3/1? Well, notice that you will be cross-canceling here and here. And so that's -1. -1 plus 2 is +1. So we know that where x is -3, y is +1. Okay, let's go ahead and substitute 0. 1/3 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 2 is 2. So where x is 0, y is 2. All right, let's substitute +3. 1/3 times 3 or 3/1. 1/3 times 3 or 3/1 is actually 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. So we can say that where x is 3, y is also 3. And then the last one we want to do is substitute 6. 1/3 times 6/1. And so we can cross cancel here. And so that's 2. Plus 2 is 4. So where x is 6, y is 4. The reason that we did that is notice that all of my ordered pairs are in whole numbers. I'm not graphing any fractions. I was able to, in each expression, I was able to get rid of the fraction. And so that's why it's much easier to graph an equation that has a coefficient of x by using the multiples of the denominator. All right, let's graph this. What you will do is you will graph all 4 ordered pairs. Here's x. Here's y. I don't know if this is going to show up on the video, the points, I'm not sure. But I'm going to try to make them big enough to show up. Okay, so we're going to graph the first point. It's -3, +1. That's there. 0, +2, 3, 3, and 6, 4. I hope you can see those. If you can't, well, you can graph those points yourself and you can draw a line through them. And that's your equation. All right, let's continue on to number 2. Okay, notice on number 2 that y is not isolated. Y is not alone on the left-hand side of my equation. So we need to do some inverse operations to get it alone. So how am I going to isolate y? The first thing I need to do is remove that positive 2x by subtracting it from both sides of the equation. So 2x minus 2x, well, that cancels out. I'm going to bring down the negative y equals negative 2x plus 2. We want them in that order. The variable term first and then the constant. Is y isolated? No, it's not. Y has a coefficient of -1. So I need to divide by -1, and whatever I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. So y equals 2x minus 2. And so that is the equation we're going to work with. It's the same exact equation that we were given, but this is the one we can work with easily in our table of values. Okay? All right, let's set up our table. X, 2x minus 2, y, and the ordered pair xy. Okay, here we go. All right, so we need to find values for x. And because the coefficient for x is an integer, it's not a fraction, we can go ahead and choose the ones we'll always use. -1, 0, 1, and 2. Okay, here we go. Let's substitute. 2 times -1 is -2. -2 minus 2 is -4. So I can say that where x is -1, y is -4. Let's substitute 0. 2 times 0 is 0. And 0 minus 2 is -2. So I can say that where x is 0, y is -2. All right, so we have 2. This time I'm going to substitute 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. So where x is 1, y is 0. And let's substitute 2 this time, +2. 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 minus 2 is 2. So where x is 2, y is 2. Let's graph those 4 points. Wait, sorry about that. Here's the x-axis, there's the y, and let's start graphing points. We have -1, -4, we have 0, -2, we have 1, 0, and we have 2, 2, and so we can draw our line right through those points. Use a straight edge, please, if you're doing this on paper. Okay, let's continue. Number 3. X equals 3. X equals +3. This is one of those that there is no table of values. There is nothing to do. I can simply graph this very easily. Okay? Oops. Not that easy to draw. Okay, so here's my x-axis, here's my y-axis, and I'm going to locate the point x equals -3. And I know that if I have x equals a constant, I have a vertical line along, +3 on the x-axis. Y equals -2. Well, that's just as easy. Let's graph this one. Here's the x-axis. Here's the y-axis. Y is -2, that's there. This is a horizontal line that goes through -2 on the y-axis. Okay, let's continue. Okay, write it down. You're going to do this one on your own. I just want to call your attention to the fact that y is not isolated, and that's your first job. Your first job is to isolate y. Okay, pause the video now. Work this one through, write your table of values, graph your 4 ordered pairs, come on back and check your work. Okay, so this one we wound up with fractions to graph anyway. So here are your ordered pairs. -2, -5.5, 0, -2.5, 2, 1/2, 4, +3.5. Okay. Independent practice, we're going to continue writing equations in standard form. Here's your standard form. I'll write it for you. AX plus BY is equal to C. So remember that for this exercise, you're going to write yes or no. And if yes, you're going to write the equation in standard form. I want you to work on 12 through 18. Okay? And then you're going to graph each equation by making a table. You're going to work on 4, 5, and 6. Making a table of values. There's obviously, you'll have to work on graph paper for 4, 5, and 6. And we'll go over these tomorrow. Okay, God bless you. Have a great night.